Greetings, this is Amy Wentley, and I'm with Chai Knuckles Knitting, and this is episode 2020-7, Brioche Workshop, Brioche Twisted Headband, right side row 1A and 1B. This is one in a series of 3 videos. The first one covered the setup rows, so if you haven't watched it, please go back and do so. And then the next video, the third in the series, will cover row 2A and row 2B. So right now we're on the first row, row 1. The first row has 2 parts, one for color A and one for color B. So this is row 1 on the right side for color A, row 1 on the right side for color B. So we're going to start with color A, and what you'll notice right now is that both of our working yarns are on the right side. There isn't one on each side. They're both on the right side, so we know we're ready to start working here. We're going to start with color A, and if you'll notice what's already on our needle is we have a border stitch here. Then we have a plain stitch, a stitch with its hood, a plain stitch, a stitch with its hood, a plain stitch, a stitch with its hood, plain stitch, stitch with the hood, plain stitch, stitch with the hood, plain stitch, border stitch. Okay, you'll notice that every plain stitch with a hood has the opposite color hood on it. A stitch with a hood has an opposite color hood, and the plain stitch has no hood at all. Okay, so we're going to start following the directions. This is right side A, that's color A. This is row 1. So we're going to knit the first stitch as it says. And then we'll notice that the next stitch on the needle is a plain stitch without a hood. We want to give this plain stitch a hood now. You will never be giving a stitch with a hood another hood. So you just want to have a plain stitch and you're going to give it a hood. And the way that you're going to do that is to slip yarn over. So we're going to bring the yarn to the front. You're going to slip the stitch and you're going to take the yarn over the back. The next stitch is a bark stitch. This is going to be knitting the white stitch and its hood together. It's a brioche knit stitch. They call it a bark stitch. So you knit the plain white stitch with its hood together. Now, since this is a knit stitch, you want your yarn in the back. So you're not bringing the yarn all the way to the front again, as if to purl. You're just taking this yarn over the dark stitch to give it its hood, and you're going to knit or bark the brioche stitch and its hood together. So what happened when you worked that brioche stitch and the hood together, you end up with a plain white stitch there. So we've got the border stitch, a blue stitch with a hood, a plain white stitch. So we come up to a blue stitch and we're going to want to give it a hood. So we need to bring the yarn in the front, slip, take the yarn to the back over to give it its hood, and then we're going to want to knit the next stitch and its hood together. And that gives us a white stitch. So we've got border stitch, stitch and a hood, white stitch, stitch and a hood, white stitch. And one more time, you're going to bring the yarn to the front. You're going to slip the dark stitch, give it a white hood, and you're going to knit the white stitch and its hood, dark hood together. Okay, so let's try this with continental knitting. Okay, you're going to slip this next stitch and give it a hood. So you're going to bring the yarn to the front. You're going to slip that stitch, take the yarn over the top, and then bark, knit the next stitch and its hood together. You'll bring the yarn to the front. You'll slip the plain dark stitch. You'll give it a white hood over the top, and then you're going to bark, knit, brioche knit the white stitch and its hood together. And then one more time, you're going to bring the yarn to the front. You're going to slip the dark stitch and give it its hood. And then it says, slip one with yarn in front. So you're going to bring the yarn to the front and slip that last stitch. And so now you've finished the first part of row 1. And you have your A color at the end of the row here that you just finished. The B color is still at the beginning of the row. And we had a border stitch, a stitch in its hood, dark stitch in its hood, light stitch, 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 dark stitch in its hood, border stitch. Okay. At the end of row 1A, it says slide the stitches. You're going to slide the stitches to the other end of the needle where your dark yarn still is. So you'll notice right now, if you ever pick up your work and you have one yarn on one side and one yarn on the other side, you're actually in the middle of the row. In order to finish a row, both of your yarns have to end up on the same side. So we slid the stitches, and now we're at row 1, color B. And the first instruction says slip 1 with yarn and back. So we'll do that. Slip 1. We slip the 1 plain white stitch. And then it says bark 1. So we're going to knit this dark stitch and its hood together. And then it says slip 1 yarn over bark 1 to last stitch. So we bring the yarn to the front. We're going to slip the plain stitch, take the hood over it to the back, and then we're going to knit the next stitch and its hood together. We're going to bark them. Brioche knit. So we're going to bring the yarn to the front. We're going to slip the plain white stitch to give it its hood. And then we're going to knit the dark stitch in its hood, brioche knit the dark stitch in its hood together, barking them. Okay. And one more time, we'll bring the yarn to the front. We're going to slip the white stitch and take the yarn over the top, and we're going to bark, brioche knit the dark stitch and its hood together. There we go. So far we have a border stitch, a plain dark stitch, light stitch and a hood, plain dark, light stitch and a hood, plain dark, light stitch and a hood, plain dark. So I will show the Continentals how to do this. You're going to bring the yarn to the front. You're going to slip the next stitch, and you're going to take the yarn over to give it a hood, and then you're going to bark the knit stitch and its hood together. You're going to bring the yarn to the front. You're going to slip the plain stitch and give it a hood, and then you're going to bark, brioche knit the stitch and its hood together, and then we're at the last stitch. So we're going to want to slip 1 with the yarn in front, and then the instruction says to turn. We know we're at the end of the row now because both of our yarns are at the end. We've set up a border stitch, a dark stitch, light stitch with a hood, dark stitch, light with stitch with a hood, dark stitch, light stitch with a hood, dark stitch, light stitch with a hood, dark stitch, light stitch with a hood, dark stitch, border stitch. So that's it for today, and come back for the next video to find out how to finish row 2.